Hello and welcome to the TallTimber tutorial series, video number 4. In this video, we will be working with the step number 2, input parameters, and the optional settings within that. So let's click on that. So in the previous video, we changed the species codes to the alphabetical values, and we changed the basal area factor. So I'm going to change the weight and sorting values in setting number 2 in this video. I'm going to do this because of some regional observations of the wood density of a couple of species that are important within the inventory that I've done. These species will be red spruce, which is number 13 on the sort order. You can see if I highlight this row and scroll over, it's number 13 on the report order, and that was dominant in my stand. And also paper birch or white birch. If I highlight that and move over, that is number 64 in the report order. That was the dominant hardwood within my stand. So to change these values, I'm going to do the same technique that I used to change my user codes to alphabetic 2-character codes. I have my spreadsheet down here with my species list, species codes list, or my codes list. And in my modified density spreadsheet, I have changed a couple of values. It's the same as my user codes, and I recommend this for most people is keeping a couple of these codes lists around if you want to change your codes regularly. So what I have here is the species that I'm using. Balsam fir is in my inventory. That was number 2 in the list. And red spruce, as I'd mentioned, is the dominant species in my inventory, and I want to show up at the top of my list. The other thing I'm going to change is the density of the wood, the pounds per cubic foot. For some reason, the trees in my area seem to grow less dense, at least red spruce does. So I'm changing that from the original value of 49.41 pounds per cubic foot to 45 pounds per cubic foot. I've done the same thing with paper birch. Maybe it grows slower here, and for some reason it's almost as dense as oak is. So it was 52.94 pounds per cubic foot, and I've changed that to about 60. Really, I've done this just so it's very obvious what the difference has been made. The other thing I've done is the original sort order was 64. I've changed this one to 39 in the paper birch, and the reason for that being I'm having it in a list with aspen, which has a sort order of 40, and I want it to show up ahead of aspen to be at the top of the list. This will start to make sense in just a moment as I show you some of the example outputs from the reporting process. So let's go through the copying first. Just as we'd done before, I'll highlight the top 2 rows that I want of the columns just below the label, and then I can hold Control and Shift while pressing the down arrow, and it will copy all of those values, including the alterations that I've made here. I can then copy that, and going over to my TallTimber table, I can scroll this bottom bar over to the right so that I can see the fields that I want to change, pounds per cubic foot and report order, and highlight them by dragging across the headers. And again, right-click in the header that you've highlighted and click Paste. So as before, as we did with the species, it's going to say pasting 62 records. That's the correct number. We want to make sure we hit every single one. Click Yes. And then if I scroll down a little bit to where red spruce was, see there's report order goes 11, 12. It should be 13, 14 as numbers go, but I've changed it to 1 so that red spruce will show up at the top of my softwood list. So at this point we were a little bit abstract, and in this video series we haven't gone through the reporting process yet, but I want to illustrate the effect of this. So I've done a couple of reports and saved them as PDFs, which is the default, and we're going to take a look at the default values before we changed it first as a little bit of a context. So this is my one stand, a softwood stand, and we have an output that gives the saw log volumes as well as the pulp and total tons per acre. So I'm going to be looking at the total tons per acre here because this is the overall weight of the tree, both the pulping and the saw log. So in this first report, these are my default values. I have balsam fir at the top of the softwood list, and red spruce comes next. Red spruce, as you can see by the overall tons per acre, is the dominant species out of all of the species that are in this inventory. And then in the hardwood section, which is down below, I have aspen, then paper birch, then sugar maple. The only aspen that we had in our inventory was a cull tree, and so it doesn't have any volumes or tons per acre associated with it. Paper birch was the dominant hardwood, and I want that at the top of my list. Also recall that I changed the density for red spruce and paper birch. So these are the values we have here. When I've modified the values, as we did just a moment ago, not only will those density values change the total tons per acre, but now you can see as I change to the modified report, red spruce is at the top of the softwood list, and paper birch is at the top of the hardwood list. Again, this was just done by changing the report order of the species so that I can put it relatively higher on the list than the other species that are associated with it, whether they're hardwood or softwood. The paper birch has a total tons per acre of 6.8, whereas the default had 6.0. The red spruce now has a density of 16.9, where in the default, which I'm going to shift to now, was originally 18.5. So as you can see, just changing those numbers, the pounds per cubic foot density within our step 2 settings has given us a very vastly different reading of the tons per acre that are in this forest that we're inventorying, which over the course of the 268 acre stand, or perhaps a much larger ownership, can be very significant, which is why this is an important process to understand and something that should not be taken lightly. As we go through the combined report process later on in the video series, I will show where this is listed at the second page of every report. So that was video number 4, in which we worked with some of the optional settings in step number 2, chiefly the density and report order. Thanks for watching. Please stay tuned.